The Spanish-American War and its effects. As you have seen with our previous activity, there are four main causes to the Spanish-American War. The first one being the rebellion in Cuba. In 1895, the Spanish adopted a policy called reconcentration to suppress the Cubans and force them into camps with little food and poor sanitation. Cuba felt it was being treated unfairly by Spain and then turned to the United States for help. The second cause of the war was yellow journalism. This is a tactic by Joseph Pulitzer and William Hearst in which they used their newspapers to set up a media battle by printing sensational stories which fostered anti-Spanish feelings. An example of this was a headline saying, "Prisoners were being fed to sharks." The third cause was the Delome letter. The Spanish ambassador to America, Delome, wrote a letter which was intercepted by Cubans and given to the United States, and within that letter it stated that McKinley was a terrible president and weak. The final cause was the explosion of the USS Maine. After the Delome letter, McKinley felt it was important to protect American interests in Cuba, such as business. The ship exploded in Havana Harbor, and the blame was placed on the Spanish, though later it was found that the reason why the Maine exploded was because of the armaments in the bottom of the ship or the hull. The war was neither fought in the United States or in Spain. Instead, it took place in the Spanish colonies. The first battle of the war took place in the Philippines, which is a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean. The Filipinos, like the Cubans, were unhappy with Spanish rule, so they willingly accepted the United States' help. They did this through their leader, Emilio Aguinaldo. By joining up with the United States, they had hoped that they would become an independent country after the war. The war also took place in Cuba. The American soldiers that fought there were famously called the Rough Riders, and they were led by Teddy Roosevelt, and they won the Battle of San Juan Hill on horseback. The U.S. was able to win Cuba with the capture of Santiago after crushing the Spanish fleet in Santiago Harbor. When Spain realized it could no longer win the war with the crushing of its fleet, they decided to surrender and sign the Treaty of Paris. This was done in December of 1898. The terms of the treaty were, number one, that Cuba was granted independence, and number two, the United States was granted the colonies of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Wake Island in return for $20 million. The Spanish-American War may have seemed small, but its effects were immense. It is because of the United States' victory that they become a world power. However, the Spanish will no longer be able to compete with the other world powers. It also caused a strained relationship between Cuba and America. The Cubans believed that they would become an independent nation after the war, as stated in the Treaty of Paris. However, the United States will establish them as a protectorate, or a country whose policies are controlled by an outside nation. This was done with the Platt Amendment, which was added to the Cuban Constitution. It basically said that the Cubans would have to okay anything that they did with another country with the United States first. It also caused the Filipinos to launch a war against the United States for their independence. They fought with the US during the Spanish-American War because they believed it would lead to independence. The US will win the Filipino War, and the Philippines will not gain its independence until 1946. You can see the Spanish-American War greatly affected the United States and put them on the stage for world power.